Martha and Gerald had been married for over 40 years. They had built a life together, raised children, and watched their grandchildren grow. Their love was steady, unshaken by the trials of time. Or so Martha believed. Their home, a modest yet warm house on the edge of town, had seen decades of love and laughter. The walls were lined with photographs, snapshots of holidays, family gatherings, and quiet moments that now seemed frozen in time. Every morning, Gerald would wake before dawn, brew fresh coffee, and sit on the porch, watching the world stir to life. Martha would join him soon after, slipping her hand into his, a silent ritual that had become second nature. They rarely needed words. Their bond had been built on shared experiences, on the quiet understanding that comes only with time. But lately, something had changed. It started with small things. Gerald would leave the house late at night, claiming he needed fresh air. His phone was always face down. He was distant, distracted. Conversations that once stretched into the night now ended with absent-minded nods and hollow responses. Martha, ever the devoted wife, dismissed her concerns as paranoia. After all, wasn't trust the foundation of their long and happy marriage? Maybe he was just tired. Maybe age was catching up to him. Maybe she was imagining things. And yet, a seed of doubt had been planted, its roots slowly winding their way into the corners of her mind. Then there were the dreams, dark, suffocating nightmares that left her breathless in the dead of night. In them, Gerald would stand at the foot of their bed, his face obscured by shadows. When she reached for him, his figure would dissolve, leaving behind only an unbearable sense of dread. She would wake, heart hammering, only to find him missing from their bed. The house would be silent, save for the distant creak of the front door closing. One night, unable to quell the growing unease, she rose from bed and followed him. Peering through the living room window, she watched as he stood in the driveway, staring down the empty road as though waiting for something or someone. The streetlight cast eerie shadows across his face, and for the first time in decades, he looked like a stranger to her. At the grocery store, at the post office, even during Sunday service, she caught the lingering stares, the hushed voices. Poor Martha, she heard one woman murmur, if only she knew. Doubt seeped into her heart like a slow poison. She told herself it was gossip, meaningless chatter. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. It wasn't just the whispers. People she had known for years looked at her differently. Pitying smiles, sympathetic nods. Conversations would halt when she entered a room, and strained pleasantries would take their place. Once, she caught her neighbor, Evelyn, staring at her with such sadness that it made her breath catch. When she asked if something was wrong, Evelyn hesitated, then simply said, "Just be careful, dear." Careful of what? Martha wanted to ask. But before she could, Evelyn had already walked away. She started to notice other things. The bank teller who asked how she was doing with too much concern. The librarian who touched her hand for a second too long while checking out her books. Even Father Donovan at church seemed to speak directly to her when he warned against the sins that fester in the dark. One afternoon, she was in the bakery when she overheard two women whispering near the display case. She didn't mean to listen, but her name caught her attention. "She has no idea," one of them said. "It's been going on for months. Can you imagine?" After all these years? Poor woman. Martha cleared her throat, and the women jumped. They gave her tight-lipped smiles before scurrying away, leaving her standing there with a sinking feeling in her stomach. She tried to confront Gerald one night, her voice shaking as she asked if something was wrong. He smiled, a forced, tired smile, and told her she was worrying over nothing. He kissed her forehead, patted her hand, and went to bed early. Martha lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. The whispers were no longer just in the town. They were in her head now, too. Rage and heartbreak swelled within her. But as she stepped back from the window, something caught her eye. A shadow in the corner of the room. It moved unnaturally, its presence sinister. The woman gasped and clutched her throat, her face twisting in silent terror. Gerald stumbled backward, his expression shifting from guilt to horror. The shadow took shape. A woman, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow, her lips twisted into a grotesque smile. "You promised me forever, Gerald," the apparition crooned, her voice a haunting whisper. "Just like you promised her," Gerald shrieked, his body convulsing as unseen hands tightened around his throat. The younger woman scrambled away, screaming into the night. Martha stood frozen, unable to look away as her husband collapsed, his lifeless eyes staring through the window at her. The shadow turned. Martha gasped, stepping back as the specter glided toward the window, its eyes boring into hers. "He broke his vows," it whispered. "Now he pays." Martha's breath hitched as the room grew impossibly cold. The air thickened, pressing down on her chest like unseen hands. The specter did not fade. It lingered, watching her, its hollow eyes studying her with an intensity that sent ice down her spine. "You knew," it whispered. "You felt it. You let it fester." Martha shook her head, backing away. I didn't know. I didn't want to believe. But you did, and you let it happen." The voice grew louder, the whisper becoming a chorus of accusing cries. The walls seemed to tremble, shadows dancing across them like writhing figures. Martha clutched her chest, gasping as the room spun around her. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the voices stopped. The room fell silent. The figure was gone. Martha collapsed onto the floor, her breath ragged. But she knew this was not the end. The judgment had only begun. The next morning, the authorities found Gerald's body in the abandoned house. His cause of death? Unknown. The young woman had fled town, refusing to speak of what she had seen. Martha never spoke of it either. But sometimes, on quiet nights, she would catch a glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of her eye, and in the stillness, she would hear a whisper, soft, almost tender. "You kept your vows, Martha. That's why you're still here." Yet she no longer felt alone. The house carried an unnatural silence, as if something lurked within its walls, watching, waiting. Her nights were restless, haunted by faint murmurs and the sensation of cold fingers brushing against her skin. Shadows stretched longer than they should, moving when she wasn't looking. She would wake to the sound of footsteps in the hall, only to find no one there. She had survived, but she had not been spared.